MF3RS3M. Wow, only 4 letters this time. I'll miss calling it the license plate. In this video, I'll be very critical of this cube, but just keep in mind that like most new and popular releases, it is a very good cube, and I think that goes without saying. But since the MF3RS2 was one of the most popular cubes over the last year, it's important to ask whether the RS3 is actually better. Although it is quite cheap at only $15, being one of the cheapest good magnetic cubes, so keep that in mind as we go through this review. So just from turning the cube, it does feel a bit like the MF3RS2, but performance-wise, I would say it's actually closest to the GTS2M. Like the GTS2, here we have lighter magnets than what you'd expect in many fast cubes, compared to, say, the GAN X or the GTS3. The light magnet choice, in my opinion, is a little questionable since it's also a pretty fast cube. But even though it is quite fast, I don't think that the cube is like so uncontrollably fast or flexible that it needs stronger magnets. I think it's fine with weak magnets, but I don't think weak magnets is the ideal strength. So the GTS2 was also a fast and smooth cube with magnets that were not very strong, so I think these two cubes make a very good comparison. The main thing that I like better about the RS3 compared to the GTS2 is it has better corner cutting. Like many recent cubes, it can consistently do this bit of corner cutting here where it's right on the border of regular and reverse corner cut, where a lot of old cubes like the GTS2 could not. So because of this, I find that my slightly inaccurate turning tends to result in a corner cut versus on the GTS2 where I feel like I just kind of stop turning. However, what I don't like about this cube compared to the GTS2 is how the pieces feel like they're moving all over the place when I turn fast. This isn't the worst thing in the world. I'll take this over worse corner cutting, but on the RS3 what I mean is that the pieces feel like they have a lot of freedom to jiggle around. There's nothing wrong with the screw settings here, at least that I can tell, so the difference might be that the springs in here are weaker. I talked about the properties of springs before and how that changes what the cube feels like, but basically with weaker springs, the pieces are not held together quite as tight towards the core. Now that doesn't mean it's going to pop more often because they don't have more room to move. It's just that the area that they do have to move, they move more easily within that. So that's why the pieces feel like they're a little bit more loose, even though it doesn't actually mean they're going to pop or be worse at corner cutting. So with this, while I'm turning fast, I feel like I get more minor catches and just in general a less stable turning experience. Now speaking of stable cubes, let's talk about the MF3RS2. The cube was my old main, so I'm a little biased when I say it's hard to beat this cube. But one drawback of the MF3RS2 is that it is slow and the RS3 is fast, so they definitely tried to change that part for the better. One of the best things about the MF3RS2 was its smoothness and constancy during corner cuts. This is rare to find as many other cubes just snap to corner cut instead. The MF3RS2 can be defined by how uniquely controllable and smooth the turning experience is, and if you try to find the same qualities in the RS3, you actually will find them as well. These two cubes have very similar qualities in this regard, just with the RS3 being faster than average, and the RS2 being slower than what some people would prefer. So with speed being the main difference, it appears that the RS3 has simply improved on its speed and become faster, while keeping all the other great qualities from before. So it's just better. But not quite. Nowadays, you can't just mush good cube qualities together and say the cube is better, because every cube has good qualities. Unlike the old days, new cubes are not competing in just one dimension, whether it's speed, corner cutting, or control. The emergent qualities from all the basics of the cube determine whether a cube is more usable than another cube in all sorts of situations. It's a bit hard to explain, but basically having a few good qualities doesn't mean they'll all work well together. And that's where I find that the RS3 is a bit confused about what it really is trying to be. So because it has similar qualities to the RS2, it feels like it's trying to be a slow cube, but I can't be as pushy with my turning, because the cube is obviously faster and has more slight catches when I try to do that. So when I apply more force, I get really mixed results depending on how accurate my turn was, which is not true for other fast cubes. You can kind of find these effects on the MF3RS2, but when you apply more force, more of that force goes into turning rather than causing a lockup or something like that, which happens on the RS3. So I find that the RS2 just does this better. Now you could argue that I shouldn't be turning with much force on a fast cube since they're more sensitive to the amount of force you put, so that's fair, and so I tried turning in a more relaxed way, applying less force like I would normally do with faster cubes. This also felt kind of weird and didn't work out so well for me. But there are cubes like the GTS3 or GAN X which are very fast, and I do that exact thing, and they are in my top 3 cubes alongside the MF3RS2, so the fact that I have no problem with those makes me think the problem is actually with the RS3. So I just want to say that I'm usually not biased towards fast cubes or slow cubes because they've all been my mains at some point. I generally have two different turning styles, which is just more relaxed or more forceful, depending on the speed of the cube I'm using. And maybe categorizing cubes by just fast and slow and having one turning style for each is a bit non-progressive and I should be more accepting. After all, it's 2019. Anyway, both fast and slow cubes have their downsides and you have to adapt in a certain way to have both types of cubes feel good to you. And I feel like I have been doing that, and that's where I get my two types of turning styles from. But the RS3 being fast doesn't have the nice blend of qualities that allow me to adapt quite easily to this. One thing I like about the RS3 over the MF3RS2 because it's so fast is because I don't feel like I'm limited in my turn speed, which I do sort of feel with the MF3RS2 because it is slower than most cubes. However, even in this regard, I would prefer the MF3RS2 because even though I'm turning slightly slower, the pieces moving around less makes me make fewer mistakes, and one mistake costs way more than just turning a little bit slower. So I feel like it's just that the RS3 is not very good at being fast, and the MF3RS2 being slow is actually a little bit better. So I didn't actually check if the RS3 has weaker springs, but I think it does have weaker springs. I don't know how to even confidently check without doing a science experiment. I'd also have to take the cube apart, which I don't really want to do. But one time I spring swapped an MF3RS2 with weaker springs to make it faster, and indeed it did get faster, but a similar thing happened where the pieces started to jiggle around more and it kind of felt weird to turn. I'm sure in the design changes for the RS3, they tried to mitigate this problem, just like swap out the springs for weaker ones, see what's the problem, and try to fix it. And the RS3 is definitely better than my random spring swapped cube, but to a small yet noticeable extent, the problem is still there. I still get minor catches when I'm turning fast. Now, I can personally make that problem go away just by turning a bit slower, and then I'll do just fine. But at that point, I might as well be using the MF3RS2, because why alter my turning style when the cube can control it for me? And then my other idea is I could swap the springs of the RS3 to stronger springs, and I think this approach could actually make it a better cube. However, I am not going to do it. One reason is because it takes too long, and the other reason is because if it is a success, I'll basically be creating the MF3RS2 again. So maybe the MF3RS2 just lucked out on its qualities working really well together, and that made it a really, really good cube. To me, the RS3 is the result of changing one of those qualities, namely the speed, and realizing that the rest of what you have no longer works together quite as well as it used to. Now remember, I'm not saying that this cube is bad. Maybe you think I'm taking this too seriously in the grand scheme of things, since the RS3 is still a really, really good cube. And that is definitely true in one regard. When a cube's qualities don't work perfectly together, they can still make a great cube. And for its low price of $15, this is probably the best thing you can get at $15. So it's not that the RS3 has nothing going for it. In fact, being the best for its price is a really good title to hold. On most solves, I do just fine, so I'm not complaining about the RS3. But I was hoping it could be my main, and that's why I'm being so critical of this cube. While it is good, I don't feel like there is any potential for this cube to be my main anymore, because even though there's no one thing I dislike about it, anything I do like about the RS3 is just being done better by another cube. All of its smoothness qualities that exist on the MF3RS2 just work better on the MF3RS2. And if you enjoy the speed but want it to be more stable, then there's the GTS2. And if you want stronger magnets on a fast cube, which I think you should want stronger magnets than this, then there's the GAN X and the GTS3. But you're not necessarily like me, and maybe this cube is just the perfect thing you were looking for. After all, I can pretty confidently say that I don't get the same performance on any other cube compared to this. So much like the Yushin Huanglong or the Volk Power, it is pretty unique, and the RS3 is a top performing cube, so I'm pretty sure a lot of people will like it. Unfortunately, it's just not for me. And I'd like to say that I really gave this cube a chance, because I've been using the GTS3 for a very, very long time. And by a long time, I mean like half a year, but I usually switch cubes more often than that. So I've been kind of looking for a new main because I tend to do better when I switch more often. Not that there's anything wrong with the GTS3. Maybe I just develop bad habits if I use the same cube for a long time, and switching to a different cube tends to work better. Unfortunately, the RS3 just didn't work out for me. I was able to get decent times, but that's just by altering my turning style to be a little more careful, and I'd really rather not do that when I can get the exact same times on a different cube that doesn't make me have to do that. Also, I know there are good cubers, in fact one's a lot better than me, that do use this cube as their main, so again, not saying this cube is bad by any means, I just don't think that it is the best at what it does for any of its aspects. All right, links to buy every cube I mentioned will be in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.